I thought my son was taking me to lunch. Instead, he parked in front of a nursing home. I laughed. Very funny, David. He didn't laugh back. He turned off the engine. We're here. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Here for what? He finally looked at me. You can't live alone anymore, Mom. I blinked. What are you talking about? I was gardening yesterday. I drove to church this morning. I baked cookies for your children last weekend. His jaw tightened. This isn't up for discussion. Before I could answer, he opened my car door. The receptionist was already walking toward us. She smiled politely. Mrs. Carter? Welcome. Welcome? I stared at her. There must be some mistake. She glanced at David. He smiled at her. Everything's already been arranged. My heart began pounding. Inside, someone handed me a clipboard. There were dozens of papers, medical forms, emergency contacts, insurance information. I was too shocked to read them. David pointed to the bottom. Just sign. I reached for the pen. Then, something caught my eye. One sentence. Authorization to vacate primary residence. I stopped. What is this? David didn't hesitate. Standard paperwork. No, this isn't. I turned another page. There it was. Transfer of residential property following permanent care admission. My hands froze. My house. David sighed loudly. Mom, it's easier this way. Easier? Easier for who? I slowly put the pen down. I'm not signing. His smile disappeared. You don't understand. No. I understand perfectly. You want my house. People in the lobby turned to look. David lowered his voice. Please don't do this here. I stood up. I'll do it anywhere. You brought me here under false pretenses. You lied to me. I thought we were having lunch. A nurse stepped closer. Is everything okay? Before I could answer, David said, My mother's been confused lately. I stared at him. Confused? I'm standing right here. The nurse gave me a sympathetic smile. That smile hurt more than anything. She believed him. David leaned close enough that only I could hear him. Don't make this harder. The house is too much for you. I'll take good care of everything. Everything. Not me. Everything. Meaning, the house. I looked around the lobby. Older people sat quietly in wheelchairs. Some stared at the television. Others looked out the windows. One woman held a family photograph against her chest. No one was visiting her. A lump formed in my throat. Was this supposed to be my future? Dropped off. Like old furniture nobody wanted anymore? I want to go home. David shook his head. This is your home now. No. My home is the White House on Willow Lane. The one your father built with his own hands. He looked away. We've already listed it. Every sound in the room disappeared. What did you say? He sighed. The realtor comes tomorrow. I felt the blood drain from my face. You listed my house? We have buyers. We. My wife and I. You had no right. He rubbed his forehead. Mom, the market's hot. If we wait, we'll lose money. We lose money. Not once did he ask what I wanted. My late husband, Frank, had spent 42 years paying off that house. Every Christmas, every birthday, every family dinner, every grandchild's first steps, every memory I had lived inside those walls. And my own son was talking about it like it was an investment. I reached into my purse, pulled out my house keys, held them tightly. They're not getting my home. David smiled. A slow, confident smile. You don't have a choice. Then he reached into his jacket and held up another set of keys. The locks were changed this morning. My knees nearly gave out. He had already changed the locks. While he was pretending to take me to lunch, I looked at my son, the little boy I used to carry when he fell asleep in the car, the teenager whose college tuition his father and I worked overtime to pay, the man whose wedding we paid for. I didn't recognize him anymore. Then, his phone rang. He stepped outside to answer it. The lobby fell quiet. The receptionist looked down at her computer. No one was watching me, except one elderly man sitting across the room. He slowly folded his newspaper, looked me straight in the eyes, and whispered, "Don't sign anything." I nodded. He pointed toward the parking lot, then quietly added, "I know your husband." My heart skipped. My husband passed away 3 years ago. The old man gave the smallest smile. "I know. He asked me to help you, if this day ever came." "I know," the old man repeated. "He asked me to help you, if this day ever came." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "My husband." I whispered it so quietly I barely heard myself. "You knew Frank." The man nodded once. "We served together in Vietnam." My eyes widened. Frank rarely talked about those years. He had one old photograph in the attic. 2 young soldiers standing beside a military truck. The man in front of me looked older now, but the eyes were the same. "I'm Harold." He always called me Harry. Then he smiled. "Your husband talked about you every chance he got." My throat tightened. Outside, David was still pacing with his phone pressed to his ear. "I only had a minute." Harry leaned closer. "Did they ask you to sign anything?" "Yes." "I didn't." "Good." He nodded. "Frank told me your son would probably come after the house." I stared at him. "What? He actually said that?" Harry sighed. He hoped he was wrong. But he wasn't the kind of man who ignored warning signs. I looked toward the entrance. David was laughing now. Laughing. As if he hadn't just tried to leave his own mother in a nursing home. My stomach turned. "When did Frank tell you this?" "About 6 months before he died." My heart skipped. 6 months. That was around the time Frank had started making mysterious trips into town. Whenever I asked where he'd gone, he always smiled. Just taking care of paperwork. I never questioned him. After 44 years of marriage, you learn to trust each other. Harry reached into the pocket of his cardigan. He pulled out a small white envelope. The paper had yellowed with age. My name was written across the front. Margaret. In Frank's handwriting. My hands immediately began shaking. "I've carried this for 3 years, Harry said. "Frank made me promise. He said if David ever tried to force you out of your home, I was to give you this." I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter. The first line made my eyes fill with tears. "My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, it means I was right." I had to blink several times before I could continue. The words blurred through my tears. I prayed every day that David would remember who he was. If he didn't, then you need to remember who you are. I swallowed hard. Frank always knew exactly what to say, even from beyond the grave. I kept reading. "First, don't sign anything." A small, broken laugh escaped me. "I didn't." Harry smiled. "I knew you wouldn't." The letter continued. "Second, everything important is no longer inside the house." I frowned. What did that mean? Everything important? Frank loved that house. Every nail, every board, every flower he'd planted himself. What could possibly be more important? The next sentence answered me. "The documents are in safe deposit box 214 at First National Bank." I stopped breathing. "Bank? What documents?" "Only you can open the box. The key is hidden where nobody would ever think to look." I frowned. Frank loved puzzles. He'd once hidden my anniversary necklace inside an old coffee can just to make me laugh. Where had he hidden this key? I turned the page. "You'll find the key inside my old tackle box." A memory hit me instantly. The dusty green tackle box sitting on the top shelf in our garage. David hated fishing. He hadn't opened that thing in 20 years. Outside, David ended his phone call. He was walking back toward the entrance. I hurriedly folded the letter. Harry placed his hand over mine. "There's more. Read it later." "Not here." David stepped through the doors. "There you are." He looked annoyed. "What are you talking about?" Harry answered before I could. "Old army stories." David barely acknowledged him. He grabbed the clipboard. "You ready now?" I looked him directly in the eyes. "No." His smile vanished. "I'm going home." "No, you're not. You don't live there anymore." He actually believed it. He honestly thought changing the locks meant changing reality. I stood. "I'm leaving." He blocked the doorway. "I can't let you." Those 5 words chilled me. "Not I don't want you to. Not. Let's talk. I can't let you. As if I belonged to him. Several people in the lobby had started watching. The receptionist looked nervous. David lowered his voice. Mom, you're embarrassing yourself.
No.
I'm embarrassing you. There is a difference. He clenched his jaw. I've already signed the listing agreement. You can't back out now. I frowned. You. He realized his mistake too late. I mean,
We. No.
you. So, the realtor thinks you own my house? He didn't answer. Silence is an answer. At that moment, a woman in a navy blue blazer walked through the front door. She looked around the lobby. David Carter? His face lit up. There she is. He waved. Mom, this is Melissa. Our realtor. She smiled warmly. It's so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Carter. I'm sorry about all the changes. I know moving can be emotional. I looked at her. Did my son tell you he owns my house? She hesitated. He said, the paperwork had already been taken care of. I smiled for the first time that day. A calm, quiet smile. Then I reached into my purse, pulled out Frank's letter, and said, I'm afraid someone has lied to you. Melissa's smile faded. David's face turned white, because for the first time all day, he realized his plan might be falling apart. Melissa looked from me to David, then back again. I'm sorry, she said carefully. I don't understand. I folded Frank's letter and slipped it back into my purse. My husband and I bought that house in 1981. My name is still on the deed. David stepped forward. Mom, you're confused. I didn't even look at him.
No.
I'm finally paying attention. Melissa frowned. David told me he had authority to sell the property. I do, he answered quickly. My mother agreed. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It must have happened while I was sleeping, because this morning, I certainly hadn't. Several people in the lobby chuckled quietly. David's ears turned red. Melissa opened her tablet. I'm just trying to understand. Mrs. Carter, did you sign a listing agreement?
No.
Did you sign a power of attorney?
No.
Did you sign a transfer deed?
No.
Each answer came calmly. Each answer made David more uncomfortable. He forced a smile. Mom forgets things. I've been helping manage her affairs. I looked directly at Melissa. I balanced my checkbook yesterday. I renewed my driver's license last month. I filed my own taxes. I taught Sunday school 3 days ago. Does that sound like someone who can't understand her own finances? Melissa didn't answer. She didn't have to. The doubt on her face said everything. David sighed dramatically. This is exactly what I was afraid of. What? I asked. That you'd become emotional. Mom, Dad wouldn't want this. That did it. My sadness disappeared. In its place came something else. Resolve. Don't you dare tell me what your father wanted. You haven't earned the right. For the first time all day, David looked shaken. He wasn't expecting me to fight back. His whole plan depended on me being scared, quiet, grateful, compliant. He forgot something. I wasn't just his mother. I was Frank Carter's wife. Frank had built houses for 38 years. He used to say, a good foundation doesn't move just because the wind gets loud. I remembered those words now. I straightened my shoulders. I am leaving. David blocked my path again.
No.
His voice was firmer this time. I can't let you. Melissa stepped between us. David. I think everyone needs to slow down. He ignored her. Mom needs professional care. I've already paid the deposit. I blinked. You already paid? Yes. So, you arranged all this? Before asking me? Silence. Again. Silence. Harry spoke from his chair. I've lived here 2 years. Everyone turned toward him. I've seen families bring parents here. Most cry.
Some argue.
But every single one of them knew they were coming. The lobby became so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking near the fireplace. Harry continued. I've never seen someone trick their mother into moving here. David glared at him. This doesn't concern you. Harry smiled. It became my concern the moment you lied. The receptionist cleared her throat. Mr. Carter, did Mrs. Carter complete our admission paperwork?
No.
Has she signed a residency agreement?
No.
Then, she looked uncomfortable. We can't admit her. David stared.
What?
It's our policy. Residents have to consent unless a court has declared otherwise. I told you she has memory problems. The receptionist nodded politely. Do you have guardianship papers?
No.
Medical incapacity documentation?
No.
Then legally, she's free to leave. For the first time that day, David looked worried. He turned to me. Mom, if you walk out that door, don't expect to come back.
I stared at him.
Come back where?
The house.
I already changed the locks. I smiled.
A real smile this time.
Then I suppose. You've just admitted something very interesting. His forehead wrinkled. What? You entered my house. You changed locks. And you did it. Without my permission. Melissa slowly lowered her tablet. David, did you have written authorization? He didn't answer. David, nothing. Melissa inhaled deeply. I need to be completely transparent. If Mrs. Carter hasn't authorized the sale, I can't list that property. David's face hardened. You can.
No.
I absolutely cannot. My license would be at risk.
She closed her tablet.
I'm withdrawing from this listing until ownership is verified. David looked like he'd been slapped. You can't do this. I already did. She turned toward me. I'm very sorry, Mrs. Carter. If I had known you hadn't consented, I never would have accepted the listing. I nodded. I believe you. David watched helplessly as Melissa walked toward the exit. Just before she reached the door, she stopped, turned around, and said something that made every eye in the lobby shift back to my son. One more thing. I pulled the county property records before coming here. David forced a smile. Right. She looked directly at him. I thought it was strange that the ownership information didn't match what you told me. My heartbeat quickened. What do you mean? Melissa hesitated. I assumed the county website just hadn't updated yet.
She slowly looked at me.
But according to the public records, your husband made a legal change to the deed 6 months before he passed away. David's face lost every bit of color, because whatever Frank had done, my son clearly hadn't known about it. For the first time all day, David looked afraid. Not angry, not frustrated, afraid. He stared at Melissa. What deed change? She looked confused. You didn't know? He recovered almost instantly. It doesn't matter. My father's estate came to me. I shook my head.
No.
It came to me. Melissa opened the county records on her tablet again. I can't see the full document, but I can see a filing date. She turned the screen toward me. Filed. 6 months before Frank died. The exact time he'd started making those mysterious trips into town. The exact time he'd told me, I'm just taking care of paperwork. A tear rolled down my cheek. Even then, he'd been protecting me. David forced a laugh. So what? Maybe Dad added Mom back onto the deed. That changes nothing. Harry quietly spoke from across the lobby. If it changed nothing, you wouldn't look so nervous. A couple sitting near the fireplace exchanged glances. David noticed. He hated being watched. His entire life he'd cared more about appearances than truth. He turned back to me. Mom, we can figure this out at home. I raised an eyebrow. Really? I thought I didn't have one anymore. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket,
Pulled out his phone.
and stepped into the hallway. I watched him disappear through the glass doors. Melissa leaned closer. I think he's calling someone. The attorney? I asked. She nodded. Or whoever prepared the paperwork. Harry chuckled. People only make phone calls like that when they realize the ground just disappeared under them. I finally unfolded the rest of Frank's letter. There were only a few paragraphs left, but every word felt deliberate. Maggie, if David has done what I fear he's done, don't argue.
Don't beg.
Facts beat feelings every time. I smiled through my tears. That sounded exactly like Frank. Whenever contractors argued on a job site, he'd simply pull out the blueprint. Conversation over. I continued reading. Everything you'll need is inside box 214. The deed, the trust documents, the attorney's letter. Trust? I frowned. Frank had never mentioned a trust. Not once. The next sentence made my heart stop. Most importantly, the house can never be sold without your written approval. I read it again. Then a third time. Never. Without.
My written
approval. Harry smiled. I'd say Frank knew what he was doing. I nodded slowly. He always did. A memory surfaced. About 7 months before Frank passed away, David had come over for dinner. He'd spent almost the entire evening talking about real estate. Your neighborhood's exploding. You could sell for almost twice what you paid. You should think about downsizing. At the time, Frank had barely spoken. He'd simply listened. When David left, Frank locked the front door, looked out the living room window, and quietly said, "Money changes people." I remembered asking, "You think David's changed?" Frank hadn't answered.
now.
I finally understood why. The front doors swung open. David came back inside. His confidence was gone. He walked straight toward me. "We're leaving." I smiled politely.
No.
"We're going to the bank." His eyes widened. "What bank?" "The one your father used." "Why?" "I need to check something." His face tightened. "There isn't anything to check." "Actually, there is." He stepped closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't understand legal documents. I'll explain everything later." I met his eyes. "You've had all day to tell me the truth. You chose lies. So now, I'll choose my own attorney." Melissa quietly nodded. "That's probably wise." David rounded on her. "Stay out of this." She folded her arms. "I already told you. I'm no longer representing this sale." His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. The color drained from his face again. I couldn't see the message, but I saw his thumb freeze. Then, he looked toward the exit, as if he wanted to run. Before he could move, another voice echoed through the lobby. "David Carter?" A man in a dark gray suit stood in the doorway. Mid-60s. Briefcase in one hand, reading glasses in the other. He looked directly at me, then smiled warmly. "Mrs. Carter, my name is Thomas Reynolds. I was your husband's attorney." I blinked. "Frank's attorney?" He walked over, shook my hand gently. "I've been trying to reach you all morning." I frowned. "Me?" "Yes." He looked at David. "Your son called my office yesterday. He wanted copies of certain estate documents." I refused. David interrupted. "You had no right." Thomas ignored him. "Then, this morning, someone attempted to access your safe deposit box." Every muscle in my body tensed. The bank called me immediately. I looked at David. Slowly, silently. His eyes dropped to the floor. He had known about the safe deposit box. He just hadn't been able to open it. Thomas reached into his briefcase, pulled out a sealed envelope, and placed it in my hands. "Your husband instructed me that if anyone besides you ever tried to access box 214, I was to deliver this immediately." I looked at the handwriting on the front. It was Frank's, and beneath my name, he had written one sentence. "If you're holding this, it's time they learned what I really left behind." My hands trembled as I stared at the envelope. It was unmistakably Frank's handwriting. 44 years of birthday cards, anniversary notes, and grocery lists. I would have recognized it anywhere. Thomas waited patiently. "Mrs. Carter, Frank wanted you to open it only if this happened." I swallowed hard. "So, I think it's time." The room was silent. Even the television in the corner seemed quieter. I carefully broke the seal. Inside, there was another letter and a folded document. I unfolded the letter first. At the top it read, "To my wife, and to anyone trying to take what doesn't belong to them." I almost smiled. That sounded exactly like Frank. I began reading aloud. "My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, then someone ignored every lesson I tried to teach them." I glanced at David. He stared at the floor. "I hope I'm wrong. I prayed I would be. But if you're standing here today, it means greed finally became louder than love." A lump formed in my throat. The next paragraph wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to David. Son, if this is your doing, I'm disappointed. Not because you wanted money, because you were willing to hurt your mother to get it. David closed his eyes for just a second, as though hearing his father's words hurt more than mine ever could. I kept reading. You've forgotten something important. A house isn't wealth. The people inside it are. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Frank had said those words so many times over the years. Whenever David complained that one of his friends had a bigger home or a newer car, Frank would smile and say, "A house isn't wealth. The people inside it are." Thomas quietly cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter, there's another document." I unfolded the papers beneath the letter. Across the top, large bold letters read, "Carter Family Living Trust." David's head snapped up. "A trust?" Thomas nodded. "Yes. Created 3 years ago." David looked stunned. "There wasn't any trust." "There is." Thomas adjusted his glasses. "And there always has been." I turned the first page. The legal language was confusing, but one section had been highlighted. Thomas pointed to it. "Read that paragraph." I did. Very slowly. The words echoed through the lobby. Upon the death of Franklin Carter, the residence located at 418 Willow Lane shall remain under the exclusive lifetime control of Margaret Carter. Lifetime control. My heart began racing. I continued. No beneficiary, including children, grandchildren, or heirs, may sell, mortgage, transfer, occupy, lease, or otherwise dispose of the property without Margaret Carter's written consent. Melissa quietly whispered, "Oh." Harry grinned. "I like Frank." David looked from Thomas
To me?
back to the papers.
No.
"This isn't possible." Thomas met his eyes. "It is. And it's legally binding." David shook his head. "He never told me." Thomas answered calmly. "I imagine there was a reason." The next paragraph caught my attention. I frowned. "Thomas, what does this mean?" He looked down, then smiled. "I was wondering when you'd notice." The paragraph read, "If any beneficiary attempts fraud, coercion, forgery, elder abuse, or deception to obtain ownership of the residence." I stopped reading. The room felt suddenly colder. I looked at David. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Thomas finished reading the sentence for me. "That beneficiary immediately forfeits every interest granted under this trust." Silence. Absolute silence. David whispered, "What?" Thomas repeated it. "If you attempt to steal the house, you lose your inheritance." David's face went pale. "No, there has to be more." "There is." Thomas flipped to the last page. Frank believed in consequences. He pointed to another highlighted paragraph. I read it aloud. "Any forfeited share shall be donated equally between." I stopped. My eyebrows rose. 2 organizations were listed: the local veterans home and the Children's Cancer Hospital where Frank had volunteered after retirement. David stared. "Dad would never." Thomas interrupted gently. "He did." I watched him sign it. David suddenly laughed. A nervous, almost desperate laugh. "This is ridiculous. I'll challenge it." Thomas nodded. "You're certainly entitled to try." But Frank anticipated that as well. He opened his briefcase again and removed a thick folder. Witness statements. Medical evaluations proving competency. Video recordings of the trust signing. Everything was documented. David's shoulders sagged. Every excuse.
Gone.
His phone buzzed again. This time, he answered immediately. "What?" He listened for several seconds. Then his eyes widened. "What do you mean? The locksmith gave you a receipt?"
He looked at me.
Then away. "I'll call you back." He ended the call without another word. I frowned. "Was that your wife?" He didn't answer. Thomas did. "I have a feeling things are beginning to unravel." Just then, the nursing home's front doors opened again. A woman in a navy business suit hurried inside. She looked directly at me. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes." She offered a polite smile. My name is Linda Foster. I'm with Adult Protective Services. David's head jerked toward her. She continued, We received a report this morning that someone may have attempted to financially exploit a vulnerable adult. Then she looked directly at my son. And I'd like to ask your family a few questions. Every eye in the lobby shifted toward the woman in the navy suit. She carried a leather folder tucked under one arm. Her expression wasn't angry. It was calm, professional, the kind of calm that made people nervous. She stopped in front of me. Mrs. Carter? I nodded. I'm Linda Foster. I'm an investigator with Adult Protective Services. She handed me a business card. I'm sorry we have to meet under these circumstances. David forced a smile. There must be some misunderstanding. Linda turned toward him. Perhaps. That's what I'm here to determine. Her voice was polite, but firm. I'll need to speak with your mother alone. David answered immediately. That's not necessary. Linda looked at him over the rim of her glasses. Actually, it is. He laughed nervously. My mother's upset. She's not thinking clearly. Linda didn't even blink. Mrs. Carter. She looked directly at me. Would you like your son to remain while we speak? I answered without hesitation.
No.
David's smile disappeared. Linda nodded. Then I'd appreciate a private conversation. The receptionist stepped forward. We have a family meeting room available. Within moments, David found himself standing alone in the lobby while Linda, Thomas, Harry, and I walked into a small conference room just off the main hallway. Before the door closed, I caught one last glimpse of my son. For the first time since this nightmare began, he looked completely out of control. Linda waited until the door clicked shut. Then she opened her folder. Mrs. Carter, I want to ask you a few simple questions. Take your time. If you don't understand something, tell me. I nodded. All right. Did you know you were coming to this nursing home today?
No.
What were you told? My son said we were going to lunch. She made a note. Did you agree to become a resident here?
No.
Were you aware your home had been listed for sale?
No.
Were you asked to sign legal documents today? Yes. What were you told they were? He said they were paperwork for my care. I paused, but they included documents about transferring my home. Linda wrote for several seconds. Then she looked up. Mrs. Carter, has anyone ever pressured you to give your son money? I thought for a moment. Not directly, but he has asked about the house many times. Thomas nodded quietly. I took a deep breath. After Frank died, David started visiting more often. At first, I thought he was checking on me. He'd mow the lawn, fix a cabinet, bring groceries. I smiled sadly. I was grateful, but after a while, the conversations changed. Linda looked up. How so? He stopped asking how I was doing. He started asking about the value of the house, how much I had in savings, whether I'd updated my will, whether I still had Dad's investment accounts. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now, every conversation felt different. Thomas leaned forward. Frank told me he noticed the same pattern. He said David asked more questions about assets than family. A tear slid down my cheek. I didn't want to believe it. Linda closed her notebook for a moment. I need to ask something difficult. Has your son ever threatened you? I opened my mouth, then stopped. Threatened? Not exactly. But there was that day. About 8 months ago. I said slowly. He came over with his wife. They wanted me to move into a condominium near them. I told them I loved my home. They kept insisting. What happened then? Linda asked. I remembered every word. David had stood in my kitchen, looking out at the backyard Frank had planted. Then he'd said, You're being selfish. I asked him what he meant. He said, Dad's house is just sitting here. One day it'll all be mine anyway. The room became quiet. So, I told him, It isn't your father's house anymore. It's my home. Thomas slowly shook his head. Frank told me about that conversation. I looked at him. He did. He came to my office the next day. That was when he added the final protection clause to the trust. I closed my eyes. Even after all these years, Frank had still been looking after me. A soft knock came at the door. The receptionist stepped inside. "I'm sorry to interrupt." She looked at Linda. "Someone's here asking for Mrs. Carter." "Who is it?" Linda asked. "A locksmith." My eyebrows rose. "A locksmith?" The receptionist nodded. "He says he has something that belongs to her." Linda stood. "Please send him in." A few moments later, a man in work boots walked into the room carrying a small cardboard box. He looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes. My name's Mike. I think I owe you an apology." He placed the box on the table. "I changed the locks at your house this morning. David had told me his mother knew all about it. He said she'd lost her keys." I believed him. I stared silently. Mike sighed. "About an hour after I finished, I started thinking about it. The whole thing didn't sit right. So I checked the work order again." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "The authorization wasn't signed by you. It was signed by your son." Thomas asked quietly, "Did he claim to own the property?" Mike nodded. "He told me he was taking over the house." I didn't think to question it. His shoulders slumped. "I should have." Mike pushed the cardboard box toward me. I took the new lock cylinders back out. "I put your original locks back on." I blinked. "You did." He smiled. "About 30 minutes ago." I figured. If I was part of the problem, I should be part of fixing it. Tears welled in my eyes. "Thank you." He shook his head. "No, ma'am. I'm the one who's sorry." Then he reached into his shirt pocket. "And I found these inside the mailbox." He placed 2 house keys on the table. My keys. The little blue keychain Frank had carved for me himself. I picked them up with trembling fingers. For the first time that day, I felt like I hadn't lost my home after all. Just then, Thomas's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. His expression changed instantly. He answered. "Yes." He listened for less than 10 seconds. Then looked directly at me. "Mrs. Carter, I'm afraid we have another problem." "What is it?" He slowly lowered the phone. "Your daughter-in-law has already started moving furniture out of your house." For a moment, I couldn't process what Thomas had just said. "My daughter-in-law is in my house?" Thomas nodded. "The neighbor across the street called my office. They recognized the moving truck." My stomach dropped. Evelyn, David's wife.
She always smiled when she saw me.
Always brought flowers on Mother's Day. Always ended every visit with, "Love you, Mom." Now, she was emptying my home. David burst through the conference room door. "You can't keep talking without me." Linda stood immediately. "Mr. Carter, I asked you to wait outside." He ignored her. He looked straight at Thomas. "What did you tell her?" Thomas calmly closed his briefcase. "Only the truth." David noticed the keys in my hand. His face tightened. "What are those?" I held them up. "My house keys. They don't work anymore." "They do now." Mike folded his arms. "I changed the original locks back." Silence. David slowly turned toward him. "You what?" "I put Mrs. Carter's locks back where they belong." "You had no authority." Mike didn't flinch. "Neither did you." David's jaw clenched so tightly, I thought I heard his teeth grind. "You just cost me thousands of dollars." Mike shrugged. "I'd rather lose money than help steal an old woman's home." The room fell silent. Those words landed like a hammer. Not because they were cruel, because they were true.
David pointed at me.
"This is unbelievable. After everything I've done for you." I stared at him. "What exactly have you done for me today?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "You lied to me. You tricked me into coming here. You tried to have me admitted. You listed my home. You changed my locks. And now your wife is removing my furniture." I took one slow step toward him. "So tell me again. What favor did you do me?" He looked away. Linda made another note in her folder. Then she asked, "Mr. Carter, did your wife enter Mrs. Carter's home today?" He hesitated. "Yes." "Why?" "To help pack." Linda's pen stopped moving. "Pack whose belongings?" He frowned. "My mother's." I answered quietly. "I never asked her to." Linda looked at him again. "Did Mrs. Carter give either of you permission to remove her property?"
"No."
Did she authorize anyone to enter her home?
No.
Another note. Another long silence. Thomas's phone rang again. He answered almost immediately. Hello. He listened, then smiled. Thank you. He hung up. What happened? I asked. Your neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, called the police. David's head snapped up. What? Thomas nodded. She saw people loading furniture. She knew you weren't supposed to be there. So, she reported a possible burglary. I couldn't help smiling. Mrs. Alvarez. She had lived across the street for 30 years. Every Christmas, she'd brought over homemade tamales. Every spring she'd complained that Frank mowed his lawn too early in the morning. She noticed everything. Apparently,
She still did.
David grabbed his phone. He frantically dialed Evelyn. She answered on the second ring. What? He turned away from us.
No.
Stop loading. Put everything back. A pause. What do you mean the police are already there? His shoulders slumped. They're asking questions? Another pause. No. Don't say anything else. He ended the call.
Slowly.
Very slowly. He lowered the phone. Linda spoke first. Mr. Carter. I strongly suggest you cooperate. He looked exhausted. I wasn't stealing. I was helping. Helping who?
She asked.
My mother. I shook my head.
No.
You were helping yourself. A memory suddenly surfaced. One I hadn't thought about in years. The summer after Frank retired. We were cleaning the attic. David had found an old wooden box. Inside were baseball cards Frank had collected as a boy. David had asked, "How much are these worth?" Frank laughed. I don't know. We should sell them. Frank had smiled.
No.
They're memories. After David left that afternoon, Frank looked at me. Sometimes I wonder if he sees value. Or only price. Back then, I thought he was being too hard on our son.
Now.
I wished I'd listened more carefully. Thomas reached into his briefcase once again. I almost forgot. He removed a sealed envelope. This arrived at my office 3 months after Frank passed. It was delayed because of a filing issue. I've been holding it until the appropriate time. I looked at the familiar handwriting.
Frank.
Again. He certainly hadn't left anything to chance. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No explanation. Just one handwritten sentence. Maggie, if David ever chooses money over family, don't save him from the consequences of his own choices. My vision blurred. That was Frank.
Kind.
Patient. Forgiving. But he believed people had to live with what they chose. I folded the note carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. Then I looked at my son. For the first time all day, I didn't see the little boy I had raised. I saw a man who had made a long series of decisions, every one of them bringing him here. He opened his mouth. Mom. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air. I searched his face, looking for regret, looking for shame, looking for my son. Instead, I saw fear. Fear of losing the house. Fear of losing his inheritance. Fear of being caught. But not. Fear of losing me. There is a difference. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. A soft knock interrupted the silence. The receptionist stepped inside. Mrs. Carter, there's a police officer here. He says he needs to speak with everyone. Linda closed her folder. Thomas picked up his briefcase. Mike removed his cap. David's face turned completely white, because, standing just outside the conference room, was the same officer who had responded to the call at my house. And in his hand was a clear evidence bag containing something I recognized immediately. Frank's old leather document binder, the one that had always been locked inside our bedroom safe. The evidence bag caught my eye immediately. Inside was Frank's old brown leather document binder. I hadn't seen it in years. He always kept it locked inside the small safe in our bedroom closet. Insurance papers, military records, our marriage certificate, the original blueprints for the house. Frank called it the family's history. My heart started racing. Where did you find that? The police officer looked at me. Inside a moving truck parked outside your residence. David's eyes grew wide. No. The officer turned toward him. Sir, are you David Carter? He nodded slowly. Yes. I'm Officer Ben Harris. I responded to a possible burglary call at 418 Willow Lane. The room became silent. Officer Harris placed the evidence bag on the conference table. When my partner and I arrived, we found a moving company loading furniture. They stopped immediately. They told us they had been hired by your wife. I looked at David. He still couldn't meet my eyes. The officer continued. While checking the truck, we found several boxes labeled documents. He gently tapped the evidence bag. This binder was inside one of them. I felt sick. Evelyn hadn't just packed furniture. She'd emptied my bedroom. Thomas frowned. Officer, was the bedroom safe open? Yes. Forced?
No.
Everyone looked at David. His face had gone completely pale. I spoke quietly. The combination. David closed his eyes. I already knew. Years ago, Frank had asked David to open the safe while we were on vacation. He'd memorized the combination. We'd never changed it. Because he was our son. Officer Harris broke the silence. Mrs. Carter, did you authorize anyone to remove documents from your home?
No.
Did you authorize anyone to open your safe?
No.
He made another note. David finally spoke. I wasn't stealing. I was protecting everything. I looked at him. Protecting it from whom? He didn't answer. Because there wasn't an answer. Officer Harris carefully removed a folded inventory sheet from his notebook. We've secured the residence. The moving truck has been stopped. No additional property is being removed. Relief washed over me. The house was still mine. Its memories were still inside. Then the officer added, there is one issue. My stomach tightened. What issue? The safe was nearly empty. I frowned. What do you mean? There were only a few family photographs. The shelves where legal documents normally would have been were empty. Thomas smiled. A small, knowing smile. I believe I know why. Everyone looked at him. He turned toward me. Frank cleaned out that safe 3 years ago. The important papers were moved to box 214. I nodded slowly. Of course. Frank hadn't trusted the safe anymore. He'd trusted the bank. David suddenly slammed his hand against the table. This is insane. I was only trying to help. Linda remained perfectly calm. Mr. Carter. Helping someone doesn't require lying to them. He looked at her. You don't understand. No. I understand very well. You arranged a nursing home admission. You attempted to sell property. You entered a residence without permission. You removed personal belongings. Those are facts, not opinions.
Facts.
Exactly like Frank had written. Facts beat feelings every time. Just then, another knock sounded at the open conference room door. A woman in her 40s stepped inside wearing jeans and a light blue sweater. She looked nervous. Very nervous. She held her purse tightly against her chest. I recognized her immediately. Evelyn. My daughter-in-law. Her mascara had run. She looked like she'd been crying. She wouldn't look at David. Instead, she walked directly toward me. I'm so sorry. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I should have called you. I knew it didn't feel right. David spun around. Evelyn. She ignored him. She kept looking at me. I asked him 3 times if you'd agreed. He told me you had. I believed him. David's face twisted with anger. So now you're blaming me? She finally turned toward him.
No.
I'm telling the truth. The room fell silent. Evelyn wiped a tear from her cheek. When the police arrived, they asked me one question. Did Mrs. Carter tell you to remove her belongings? She swallowed hard. I realized I'd never actually spoken to you. Not once. She reached into her purse, pulled out a ring of keys, and placed them gently in front of me. I found these in David's desk drawer last night. I looked down. There were 3 keys. 1 mailbox key, 1 garage key, and 1 small brass key, smaller than the others. Thomas leaned forward. His eyebrows lifted. Mrs. Carter, I believe that's the key to safe deposit box 214. I picked it up carefully. It fit perfectly in the palm of my hand. Frank hadn't hidden it in the tackle box after all. He'd hidden it somewhere even safer. Somewhere David would never expect. In his own son's desk. Frank had counted on one thing. David would never imagine his father had hidden the most important key, right under his own roof. Thomas looked at the brass key, then at his watch. The bank closes in less than an hour. He smiled gently. If we're going to learn what Frank really left behind, we need to leave now. The drive to First National Bank felt longer than it really was. Thomas drove. I sat beside him. Officer Harris followed in his patrol car. Linda from Adult Protective Services came behind us. Even Melissa, the realtor, asked if she could come. She said quietly, "I think I need to see how this ends." Harry stayed behind at the nursing home. As I hugged him goodbye, he smiled. Frank was always 3 steps ahead. "I think you're about to find out just how far." David followed in his own car. So did Evelyn. Neither of them spoke. Not to each other. Not to anyone. When we reached the bank, I sat in the parking lot for a moment. The building looked exactly the same as it had 20 years ago. Frank always insisted on coming here himself. Even after online banking became popular, he'd joke, "I trust people more than passwords." A smile crept across my face. He would have loved the irony. Thomas opened my door. "Ready?" I nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be."
Inside.
The branch manager met us immediately. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes. My name is Susan Miller. We've been expecting you." She looked toward Thomas. He called ahead. Susan led us into a private office. She glanced at the brass key in my hand. "I'll also need your identification." I handed her my driver's license. She compared the signatures, smiled, then stood. "If you'll follow me." The vault door was enormous. Cold steel, heavy enough to survive almost anything. She inserted one key. I inserted mine. There was a loud click. Then, box 214 slid slowly out. It was heavier than I expected. Susan placed it on a small table. "I'll leave you alone." She quietly closed the door behind her. For several seconds, no one moved. I rested my hand on the box. Frank had packed this himself 3 years ago, knowing, one day, I would need it. I slowly lifted the lid. Inside, everything was perfectly organized. Neat folders, a small wooden box, several sealed envelopes, and one leather journal. Thomas smiled. "That looks like Frank." The first folder was labeled Property Deed. Thomas opened it carefully. He scanned the first page, then the second. A slow smile spread across his face. "What?" I asked. He looked at David, then back at me. Frank didn't just update the deed. He completely changed ownership. David stepped forward. "What does that mean?" Thomas continued reading. "The property was transferred into the Carter Family Living Trust." "We know that." Thomas nodded. "Yes. But that's not the important part." He turned the document toward me. "There." I read the highlighted sentence. Then read it again. My eyes filled with tears. "What does it say?" Melissa asked softly. I looked up. "It says, I am the sole trustee." Thomas smiled. "Exactly." David frowned. "So?" Thomas folded his hands. "So, the trustee controls everything. You," he pointed at me, "own the decision-making authority. You alone. No beneficiary can overrule you. No family member. No future heir. No one." David shook his head. "There has to be another trustee." "There isn't." Thomas pointed to another page. "If Margaret Carter becomes unable to serve, an independent trust company takes over." David blinked. "Not me." "No, never you." The room became very quiet. Frank hadn't simply protected me. He'd removed every opportunity for anyone to pressure me. Even after I was gone, I reached for the small wooden box. Inside was Frank's wedding band, his old pocket watch, and a folded photograph. It was taken the day we bought our house. We looked impossibly young. Frank's arm wrapped around my shoulders, both of us standing proudly in front of nothing more than a wooden frame and a foundation. On the back, he had written, "We built this together.
No one gets to erase that." I pressed the photograph against my chest.
There was one envelope left. Across the front, Frank had written, "Open last." I smiled through my tears. Still giving instructions. Thomas chuckled. He always did. I carefully opened it.
Inside
Was a handwritten letter. No legal language. No documents. Just Frank. "My Maggie, if you've reached this letter, then the hard part is over. You don't have to prove anything anymore. The truth already has." A tear slipped onto the page. I continued reading. "Don't spend what's left of your life fighting. Spend it living. Travel if you want. Spoil the grandchildren who still love you. Plant more roses. Drink coffee on the porch every morning. Laugh whenever you can." I smiled. Those were all the little things we'd planned to do together. Then came the final paragraph. I had to stop twice just to steady my breathing. "And if David is standing beside you, tell him this." The room went completely silent. Even David looked frozen. I looked at my son. Then read Frank's final message aloud. "Son, the day you chose my house over your mother, you stopped deserving either one." David's shoulders collapsed. His eyes filled with tears.
Real tears this time.
But no one spoke. No one interrupted. Because Frank had said everything that needed to be said. Thomas quietly reached back into the safe deposit box. "There appears to be one final document." I frowned. I thought that was everything. So did I. He unfolded the last sealed paper. His eyebrows shot up. Then he looked at me in complete disbelief. "Mrs. Carter, I've practiced estate law for 35 years. And I have never seen anything like this." Thomas carefully unfolded the final document. He read the first page, then the second. He looked up at me, shaking his head in amazement. "Mrs. Carter, Frank thought of everything." I smiled sadly. That sounds like him. Thomas adjusted his glasses. "This isn't another trust document. It's something much more unusual." "What is it?" "It's a conditional family letter." Melissa frowned. "I've never heard of that." Thomas nodded. "Neither have most people. It isn't a legal weapon. It's a personal instruction left with the estate. Frank asked me to deliver it only after every legal question had been answered. So, I believe we've reached that point." He handed the folded pages to me. Across the top, Frank had written one final title, "For My Family's Future." I took a deep breath, then began reading. If Margaret is reading this, then she won. I smiled, not because I'd beaten anyone, because Frank never wanted this to become a battle. He wanted me to survive it. "Maggie, you don't need revenge. Life already gave it. The truth always arrives eventually. Sometimes it just takes longer than we'd like." I wiped another tear away. That was Frank. Always believing patience was stronger than anger. The next paragraph was addressed to everyone else. I looked around the room, then continued reading aloud. "To my children, families aren't destroyed in one day. They're destroyed one selfish decision at a time." David lowered his head. Evelyn quietly reached for a tissue. "If you're ashamed today, don't waste that feeling. Learn from it. Earn forgiveness. Don't expect it." Those words hung in the room. No accusations. No insults. Just truth. Then came the final page. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't even about the trust.
It was about me.
"Margaret, the house was never my greatest gift to you. You were. You made it a home. Every birthday. Every Christmas morning. Every scraped knee. Every family dinner. Those memories belong to you. No signature can ever take them away." I couldn't read anymore. The tears came too fast. Thomas gently took the letter before it slipped from my hands. For several moments, nobody spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was respectful. Even Officer Harris quietly looked toward the floor. Finally, David stood. Slowly, he walked toward me. His eyes were red. "I don't deserve your forgiveness."
"No,"
I answered honestly. "You don't." He nodded. "I know. I lied. I manipulated you. I cared more about money than you. His voice broke. I don't know when I became that person. I looked at him for a long time. Long enough to remember the little boy who used to chase fireflies in our backyard. The teenager who hugged me after every baseball game. The young man who cried on his wedding day. That son hadn't disappeared overnight. He'd gotten lost, one decision at a time. Just as Frank had written. I love you, I said quietly. His eyes filled again. But loving someone doesn't erase consequences. He nodded. I understand. I'll accept whatever happens. Linda from Adult Protective Services closed her folder. Mrs. Carter, based on everything we've documented today, you have every right to pursue legal action. Thomas added gently, there are also civil remedies available. Everyone waited for my answer. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Frank's last letter echoed in my mind. You don't need revenge. I looked at David. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life in court. Relief crossed his face. I held up my hand. I'm not finished. The law will handle whatever it needs to handle. You'll answer for your choices. But I won't let bitterness become the rest of my story. David quietly whispered, I'm sorry, Mom. This time, I believed he meant it. Not because he'd lost the house. Not because he'd lost the inheritance. But because, for the first time, he understood what he'd almost lost. A month later, I moved back into my home. The roses Frank planted were beginning to bloom again. Mrs. Alvarez came over with fresh tamales. Mike refused to charge me for reinstalling the locks. Melissa sent flowers with a handwritten note apologizing again. Harry came for Sunday dinner once a month. He always sat in Frank's favorite chair. And somehow, it felt right. David and Evelyn separated for a while. They both entered counseling. David found a smaller apartment across town. He started volunteering every Saturday at the veterans' home, the same one named in Frank's trust. He never asked me for money again. He never mentioned the house again. Instead, he started asking different questions. How are you? Do you need groceries? Want me to fix that porch step? Sometimes, people really can change. But only after they're forced to face the truth. On the first anniversary of everything that happened, I sat on the front porch with a cup of coffee. Just as Frank had written. The morning sun warmed the swing he'd built with his own hands. I looked across the yard. The maple tree we planted when David was born had grown taller than the roof. Life had moved forward. Not because the pain disappeared, but because I did. Before going inside, I opened Frank's last letter one more time. Tucked into the bottom corner, I noticed something I'd somehow missed. One final handwritten sentence. Small enough to escape notice. Simple enough to change everything. Take care of yourself now, Maggie. You've taken care of everyone else long enough. I smiled, folded the letter, placed it back inside the leather binder, and locked the front door behind me. Not to keep my family out, but to remind myself that home isn't where people are allowed to take from you. It's where you're finally safe enough to live.